We don't want to be the land of compliance. We want to liberate our productive and creative forces.
Europe is confused.
How do you secure peace and stability? With tweets?
We should be thankful to the US that they had the guts to do it.
Europe is just an observer of history.
And we are back with the favorite podcast of the European political nerds, the Shape of Europe podcast. And we have to start with the topic of the war in Iran. What is very interesting is how Iran actually reacted. They unleashed the chaos with their missiles, drones flying in all sorts of random directions towards their neighbors, but also in the direction of the EU. Cyprus was also affected. Turkey, can you imagine similar activity from Russia, just firing randomly missiles at neighboring countries, at European Union member states? It's scary. I mean, the strategy works, I think, because everyone now is discussing the consequences, the economic consequences, the security consequences. Europe is confused.
We're always confused in Europe. We're always confused in Europe. Seems like we never know what's going on. Well, where to start?
Iran has time. The time is on their side, and their government structure is also one that can withstand multiple casualties, as we see. And the US has midterm elections coming up, and the allies keep also asking, hey, what the hell is happening?
Look, with everything that you are trying to do on the international level, on the domestic political level, or even in our everyday lives, when we start to do something, there's always a risk that something will go wrong. But at least we do something about it, okay? And we have this regime in the Middle East, which is consistently, has this strategy of eradicating Israel. It's harboring extremists and terrorists, and is terrorizing its own citizens. It's mass murdering its own citizens. Well, at some point you have to ask, well, when can we do something about it? Not if we should do something about it, but when we should do something about it. So I'm not going to blame the Americans for doing something about it. That I'm not going to do. The result of the intervention, of course, the jury is still out. We don't know if it's going to be positive, because so many things can go wrong. But the alternative is just to be an observer, just sit on the sidelines and see what happens if we allow a regime to acquire a regime like that of the mullahs to acquire nuclear weapons.
Oh, you think that we should be sort of thankful to the US that they had the guts to do it, while clearly European leaders are doing everything in their power to show to the Middle East, to the region, that, well, we're ready to help, but we're not part of this.
That's the usual strategy of not doing anything. This should be our neighborhood, but we're not doing anything when it comes to the Middle East or Northern Africa, or even our eastern front, our eastern neighborhood.
I mean, last time we did something was 2015, and that's basically it, right?
It didn't end well. But again, it's a matter of deciding whether we want to do something about it or just sit comfortably on our couches and on our chairs and wait to see what happens. So for me, this is the real cleavage. We can talk about strategy, we can talk about timing, but at least there's someone doing something about it. It's very simple. I'm crystal clear on my positioning. I don't believe that we just have to let things happen. That's what we're used to do in Europe, but Iran is not that random, faraway place that has nothing to do with us. Anyway, I don't understand how people believe that the liberal world order was created in the first place. How did we create a prolonged period of peace and stability in the West and the rest of the world? By just sitting behind the desk. That's what people
No, by
think
killing
that
the bad
happened.
guys. By killing the bad guys. I mean, that's the only way. And you're right to say that this regime needed to be eliminated. But well, the question is, can the US, with Israel, of course, do it alone
No,
without? Yeah,
probably not. Okay, I'm not going to be so absolute, but probably not. And that's the catch-22 here. I believe that the problem with the Americans or their miscalculation is that they can do everything by themselves. Okay, nobody else wants to come along, so yeah, we will do it by ourselves. This unilateralism, which is very intrinsic in the U.S. foreign policy, which is, again, as I said, it's not entirely negative if everybody else doesn't want to do anything about it. But in the long run, and this is a message that I've been communicating for a few months now, since the beginning of the second Trump administration, is that you cannot do everything by yourselves. Well, you need Europe with you, and that's something that it is a big revelation for the Americans sometimes, that they start something and they realize, oh, by the way, yeah, it would be much better if we had Europe on our side. Now, the difference with previous unilateral decisions, and the Americans have a lot of unilateral decisions in the past, is that at least in the past, they have tried to convince us. They have tried to create a coalition of the willing, or they have tried to create a sense of justification for their interventions. Now, on the side of the Europeans, when you don't have any skin in the game, it's very easy to just sit aside and wait and say, oh, but this was not legal. But that's not as easy as they make it sound, because regardless of whether this is a legal intervention or whether this was guaranteed by Iran's foreign policy or not, or nuclear policy or not, it will have an effect on us.
Sure. And also, if I may point out one thing here, it's not that the US didn't want European partners included, because, I mean, how many days before the attack started, we had the Munich Security Conference, and the message from Marco Rubio was clear. We want Europe to be our powerful partner and share the values. Poland, for example, the Polish government said that it knew ahead of time that they had indications from the Americans that the attack was coming.
Could be, absolutely, yeah. It's not entirely impossible that they try to gather some support for an intervention, but in the end, the result is still the same.
What are we getting from this so far, as Europe, economically, security-wise? Obviously, the security is endangered because we may have some crazy people blowing themselves up across Europe.
We're getting also sorts of instability for our neighborhood. We're possibly getting another huge migratory flow because of the instability in the region, and we're getting even higher energy prices. That's what we're getting. We are just on the receiving end of the negative effects of the intervention. So this is what is happening. The US is deciding to do something about it. And once the US is deciding to do something about it, then you are drawn into the conflict.
Whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not. If you are refusing to do that, then you are going to be on the receiving end only of the negative consequences of that intervention. Do you see the dilemma there? You might want to communicate your shining moral supremacy over the United States and the Americans, but in the end, it is you who is going to feel the negative effects of that intervention. At least the biggest part of it. And that why? Because again, you're sitting on your hands and not doing anything.
Can you imagine in the current political environment, European countries sending troops there, participating in some way at least as an active supporter, especially in light of how the EU is struggling to support Ukraine, now engaging in another war?
Yeah.
That would be very hard to sell to citizens.
The negative consequences are going to be very hard to sell to the citizens as well. And then people are going to start asking questions.
Yeah, but we both know that's not how politics works. You can't justify political actions with something not happening until with the best scenario not happening until it happens.
Why not?
So.
The threats are always, if you articulate the threats and the possible negative outcomes of this, I believe that it is possible to make people realize that we have to act now instead of later. Prevention is always a better option than the cure. Now, nobody is talking about troops on the ground. Nobody has troops on the ground.
It would be crazy, but I mean, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But there is no signal of such a thing. Maybe a proxy war with the Kurds, but not, actual soldiers on Iranian soil. We're talking about lending military assets. We're talking about securing the perimeter. We're talking about using naval bases and air bases. We're talking about this kind of support that should be more openly and wholeheartedly given to the United States. They're still our ally. And it is happening anyhow. I mean, it's happening without the headlines, obviously, but it is happening. Greece has moved military assets closer to the area, with obviously the Cyprus being under threat. It was completely justified, but this is exactly what I mean. Moving anti-missile assets, military assets, closer to the Middle East, that's a sign of support. But instead of that, what do you have? You have the self-righteous moralists like the Spanish Prime Minister saying that no, we are against. We're not going to give any kind of support. We're morally superior. Basically, this is the most dangerous option from those that you have. Once the U.S. decide to unilaterally intervene, then you will feel the consequences anyway. So even if I didn't want that intervention, the moment it happened, we have to manage it. We have to manage the negative consequences. You see what I mean? We cannot sit on our hands in our moral superiority.
I mean, in so many, Europe is already part of this, whether we like it or not.
Whether we like it or not, we are drawn into this conflict.
But listen,
and this is the strategy as well. This is the strategy.
I'm also under this impression that we are having this delusion of solving problems with declarations. Because again, Ursula von der Leyen said that security is a priority of the EU global outreach.
But again, how do you build this security? How do you secure peace and stability? With tweets? You have to have the power to back everything up. And your values are only as important as the means you have to protect them.
Yes, but then you have those who will say to that, yeah, but we don't want to go to war. Following this argument, just right away go to war with Russia, because they're weaker right now than they will be 2 years from now.
Yeah, but we are
And
weak
maybe
too.
it would make
You,
sense
you
to go
cannot even win
to
Russia after so many years in Ukraine. You cannot win. You cannot win. And anyway, it's not even it's not comparable. And what is this thing with the Europeans always going back to Russia, no matter what we're talking about? Now we're talking Iran, we go back to Russia. Now we talk about China, we go back to Russia.
Well,
We
don't
talk
you
about
think
the
it's all
US, we go back
connected?
to
Everywhere where the topic of security comes up, maybe this is my Polish bias talking, but
but look,
I
it
see
is.
the perspective of Russia. I mean, how Russia will perceive our capability to defend ourselves.
Look, Russia is not our friend, obviously, at the moment. Okay, I have a very heretical view on this, and that's that Russia is part of Europe to some extent. I mean, if you look into the European history, there's always been
Now
some
you're
sort of
quoting Catherine the Great.
they've always been part of the European security architecture. Okay, if you don't like the history, but they've always been part of the European security architecture. They were part of the First World. They were part of the Second World War. Which could be also framed as a European civil war, if you ask me, or two European civil wars. Okay, they were always there. They were always playing some part. And if you look into the history of European, I don't know, literature or painting, there's always an interaction there. The period of Soviet isolation, which was not isolation, I mean, they had half of Europe under their boots, you know. The Soviet isolation is just an outlier. They have to be, according to their worldviews and perceptions, they are part of the security architecture, and they want to be part of the European security architecture. So maybe this is something that we have to deal with, but not under the circumstances where we are weaker than they are. You see, we cannot find a balance, a working balance or a modus operandi with Russia right now when at the moment we militarily we are weaker than they are. China is a far greater threat for Europe than it is Russia at the moment and
Okay,
for
tell
the
me more.
foreseeable future.
How do you think so?
Well, they are obliterating our industrial capacity for decades now. They have the most aggressive economic and industrial policy that possibly that the world has ever seen. Our whole industrial base of our whole continent is being hollowed out and transferred to China. We will not be able to produce anything in the near future. And there are people who are proponents of something like this. Let's turn the whole Europe into a service-based economy, they would say. That's okay. We can outsource our industrial needs, construction, manufacturing, energy-intensive industries to others, predominantly China. It's a process that was created because of our own choices and because of the aggressive economic and industrial policy from the Chinese side. They're literally choosing industrial sectors. They're going all into those industrial sectors until they kill every competition, every European competition, and then they basically rule the sector.
Didn't we talk about this last time in the last episode? That, while talking about how to win the next industrial revolution with AI, we are in a phase where we are losing the previous industrial revolution as Europe. And what you just said, this narrative that was I don't know who actually imposed it on us, this mindset that we are this post-industrial society. It's a lie. I mean, dismantling the industrial base of Europe, it's criminal.
It is, and it's happening in a very systematic way, in a very methodical, systematic way, and I mean from both sides. China has a very specific strategy when it comes to that, and we are very open to this. We are naively exposed to their own aggressive economic and industrial policies, and we think this is even a good thing, But the differences between China and
we used
Europe,
to think. We're waking up. Let's be fair here.
we're waking
We're
up.
slowly waking up.
We're waking up, for sure, but it takes time, obviously. But the differences that divide us and the Chinese are much bigger than the differences between the US and Europe, say. If the future is being written because of the new industrial revolution, technologies like robotics and artificial intelligence, then the future will be written in China. And it's going to be so different from our values, our principles, our philosophical foundations here in Europe. So we have to avoid that at all costs. So yeah, focus on Iran. Regime change, it's not a necessarily bad thing. It's actually something good. And we're drawn into this intervention for regime change, even if we didn't want to, but we have to deal with the consequences. I'm very practical. I'm very realistic. I'm not introducing any moral dimension into this, not even legal. I mean, legal. Some people say it's not legal. Okay. So at the end of the day, the international law is created to protect dictators and mass murderers. That's it. That's what they're telling us. So there's always a gray zone when it comes to international law. There's always a gray zone, and this is a gray zone. And we can fight for the legality of the intervention for as long as you want. But in the end, again, the practical side of the practical dimension of this conflict is going to catch up faster than the rate of us, the speed of us finding a consensus on legal terms. So we have a responsibility and we have a duty towards our people, not just moral standard. And anyway, a good strategist always have a plan B. The plan B in this case is maybe even plan C. If there isn't a regime change, maybe the regime survives, but it becomes less extremist, and because what's the signal? The signal received that is being sent right now and received by the region. If we go too extreme, we risk hostile military intervention. If we are more moderate, on the other hand, we achieve two things with one try. The first one is to avoid any military interventions in the future, as I said. And the second one is that even our own people, will be far more, they will suffer the regime better if the regime is moderate, So that's also, why not, a plan B, a moderate regime. And then a plan C is, of course, that even if there is no success in changing the regime, we are going to weaken Iran for significantly. We're going to weaken Iran significantly, and this will support or facilitate the stability in the area for the foreseeable future, a decade into the future. That can be claimed as a win as well, and that's an exit strategy. It's a very valid exit strategy from the United States.
But that's a very possible scenario. Yeah. Way more possible than a regime change, to be honest.
Okay, yeah.
If you look what's happening so far.
If you don't have a strategy, then you cannot see anything. You only see your own moral virtues. That's how it goes.
What is very telling? Before our recording, I turned on Euronews to just see, what's happening. What is the latest? You would expect live coverage of what's happening in Iran. And what I saw, maybe I was just lucky to turn on at that moment, but what I saw was a report of a new tool. It's a phone that you can attach to your cat or dog, so that your cat or dog, if it's feeling alone at home, can call you on your cell phone. And I was like, I mean, what's happening? Like, what? I mean, this was not a paid advertisement. This was just some, random report from a technology fair, which in times of peace and prosperity would be very interesting to see. But in times of war and existential threats, I don't know. It just feels so absurd to see it. I'm not mocking Euronews. I'm mocking the European mindset in general here.
Yeah,
To be precise.
the problem with these shock therapies, and also the problem with the latest one in Iran, is that it exposes the divisions that we have. That's the counter effect of the shocking therapy. Um, it's like we're always split, and crises like this, major international events and interventions like this, um, have the potential to allow all these cleavages and the splits and the divisions to emerge and to become even more obvious to the observer. And one way to avoid the awkwardness of having to talk about how differently we approach every single crisis and every single issue is not to focus on that issue, because we don't agree anyway. We don't agree. We're not going to find a consensus. Let's move on to the next one, because we don't have to decide anything. We don't have to decide anything right now. So let's try to move on.
But listen, Antonios, this feeling that we don't have to decide is actually it might be the underlying problem of our mindset here in Europe. Yesterday, I was speaking on the evening news in Al Kahira News. It's a Egyptian news channel, and the host asked me, "So, what will be the unified? What will be the response of the EU? When will the EU have, a unified response?" And I said, well, it's hard to say, because we have 27 member states with quite different approaches. And also, everyone is trying to keep distance, not to engage and not to show that this is our war, like we said in the beginning of the podcast today. And then we talked for a while, and then she came back, the host, Marina, came back and, okay, but when can we expect a response from the EU? Like, when?
Your guess is
Because it's
as good as ours, Marina. Your guesses are as good as ours.
And it's. I feel ridiculous to speak as a European and have to explain to our neighbors. Egypt is a neighbor, that we're not in the position to have a position, because we're so divided, so confused internally, that, I mean, we're just observing, and we're just debating.
That's what we are. We are just observers of history at the moment. Europe is just an observer of history. This is the sad reality. This is the sad truth. And what I'm saying is, there are people who are perfectly okay with that. I'm not.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that for them, that's not an issue. That's not a problem. It's not a problem if we are sidelined or marginalized or irrelevant.
So you're not talking about anyone specific. You're basically talking that part of the society is just okay with it.
Yeah, not anyone specific. No, I think that's a real political cleavage in Europe today. The people, the voters, the political forces are divided between one side that doesn't even care. As long as there is going to be some sort of economic activity in the single market, whether it's service-based or whether we are dependent on China or whether we are dependent technologically or digitally on the United States, it doesn't mean anything to them. It doesn't make a difference, And I truly believe that there is a growing percentage part of the population that doesn't feel comfortable being on the sidelines, marginalized, irrelevant. And they believe that we have the potential and we can really intervene ourselves, and we can have a say in this. We don't have to be always the junior partners of the United States, and we don't have to be completely dependent on China or Russia or Turkey. We can have a role for ourselves, and we can make sure that our way of life, our civilizational heritage, our principles and values actually mean something for the future of the world. That's a real point of
This
debate.
is so sad. It's so sad. Listen, Antonios, because I don't want this entire episode to be only about Iran, but don't worry, I'm not coming up with a Russia issue right now. I read this morning a very interesting article in the Context. Context is a French EU policy news reporting service, and they wrote about that. If there is one industry that is booming because of the deregulation push, the competitiveness push in Brussels, it's the lobbying industry. What the article says, it basically describes how the European Commission's drive to slash red tape is turning into a boom time for lawyers. Because for companies navigating proposals that amend multiple laws at once, and here we're referring to the omnibus packages, are increasingly turning to something close to impossible to decode because they're so multi-layered and dimensional. This new approach of the European Commission that instead of proposing standalone regulations and directives, as it has been tradition for decades, the EU executive has now increasingly opted for omnibus texts that amend several pieces of legislation at once. And in this regard, what's also important to note is that some of them are already enforced and others are not even applied yet, and they're being changed already. And the article actually quotes a couple of lobbyists saying that, for example, the omnibus bills are unreadable and incomprehensible to most experts in the sectors concerned. It is ridiculous, said a lobbyist working for a trade association. Or another quote, the speed at which omnibus bills are discussed is a real challenge, not just for us, but also for clients, especially those who want to try to influence the final shape of the directives. And the article goes on also to mention that the NGOs and some famous EU influencers are criticizing the Commission's approach, arguing that the urgency with which it is acting is not justified and is undermining the quality and legality of the legislation.
That's another attack on the deregulations efforts in Europe. You know what? Scrap it. No, don't change anything. Everything was going great. Everything was amazing in Europe. We were saving the planet. We were saving our people. The economic boost and growth was super. We don't need it anymore. Well, let's degrowth. Why are we so wealthy in Europe? We need to be less wealthy. Let's do that. Okay? Because otherwise those people are never going to stop. Let's give them everything. Look, wherever there is an increase in legislative activity, there's going to be an increase in lobbying. That's how our liberal democracies, our advanced Western democracies work. I know that for some people, this is a bad thing, and they would very much prefer to have their own Ayatollah Khamenei in Europe to decide what we should do.
But with pronouns.
With pronouns, obviously, without allowing for the usual democratic processes, including lobbying, to participate in the decision-making processes. I'm sure that some of the people would very much prefer to that option, but this is what we have at the moment, and this is totally understandable and allowed. It's absolutely legal. The Commission itself as any other executive branch, is actually obliged to facilitate the lobbying efforts, because that's where they get the input, that's where they get the data from. Everyone is allowed to provide evidence that this or that policy is good or bad, positive or negative for their sector. I don't see any problem with that. Now, why do I think that this is hypocritical? Because for the past 20 years, the regulatory machine of the EU was um, spitting out all kinds of regulations. Huge, momentous, monstrous regulations, mammoth regulations, like the Fit for 55 package, the Green Deal, and so on. They have created, they had a very centralized plan to completely transform the society, the economy, the industry, even politics to some extent. That was okay. Nobody talked about the legality of all this. But now that some people are trying to decrease the complexity by horizontally removing regulations that they themselves, that's another hypocrisy, they themselves were introducing it for 20 years, but now they're going to take it back. Okay.
And sell it as a success.
And sell it as a success. But now it's a problem. The legality, the complexity, now that we're trying to deregulate is a problem. When we were regulating all sorts of insane, crazy stuff, it was not a problem. We were heading towards the utopia of net zero, saving the planet by killing ourselves. That was the strategy of Europe until very recently, and it changed not because not because there was a political resistance. It changed because it was the reality. The reality just made us a favor and gave us a wake-up call.
Yeah, I mean, going back to even our previous topic, Iran, even though I wanted to drop it already, you mentioned the international law before. Why don't we start the discussion about how the international law should be reformed to meet the needs of current threats and the current challenges? Why don't the EU take the leadership in that? There is so much space to take, to still take ownership, even though it feels like we're in the losing position. It's what you were talking about before. It's basically soft power that Europe should be really good at. Diplomacy, soft power. Even here we're failing.
Yeah, because we were operating under the illusion that soft power can be self-reliant and self-dependent. It's not. I said it before. Your values and your principles are only as good as the means you have to defend, protect, and project them to the rest of the world. That's it. Otherwise, it's just nice poems that we say to each other and to make us happy, to have the illusion of moral superiority.
If you speak about the rising, the boost of the lobbying industry, the fun part is that the biggest budgets are from actors outside of the European countries. Of course, US, number one of the most active spenders on lobbying in Brussels, but also UK, probably China.
No, I agree with you. But meanwhile, the European economy is predominantly small and medium enterprises that they don't even have, not a strategy, not resources, not anything to lobby. They are just recipients of the negative, once again, just recipients, observers of what is happening, and recipients of the negative consequences of all this regulation, deregulation. We like that, we don't like that. Let's increase our lobbying budgets.
That's a cultural thing. Because, for example, in the Polish business culture, there is no, it's not common to associate, to form associations. Lobbying as a thing in the Polish politics is absolutely seen as a, even criminal activity. It has a very bad association, very bad PR. And from many business associations that are representing different sectors in Poland, only a small number, only a few, like the 5 fingers of one hand would be enough to count those that are present in Brussels. And we are talking about one of the biggest economies in Europe, Poland. I mean,
Sure.
so
In the end,
it's a culture and it's a mindset thing. It's not about money. It's not about that it wouldn't be possible. It would be possible. Just get together, send someone there, and start fighting for your rights, because the system doesn't care. Those other people will lobby. The politicians who need to make the decisions will be influenced by it, and the world will just move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in favor of doing that, for sure. That's how the system is supposed to be working. Receiving all sorts of contributions, inputs, preferences from the public. And how do you do that? You do that through associating with like-minded people or like-minded businesses. And then through this association, you create common positions, and those common positions are communicated to the executive branch and other institutional stakeholders. And that's how the decision-making process develops and evolves in Western democracies. So I'm all in favor of that. Now, my problem is that we have been regulating so much, that we have created so complex regulatory frameworks with all sorts of justifications. What we have effectively created is an economy that regulatory arbitrage, is a whole industry in itself. That's why lawyers are so much needed. That's why consultants are so much needed. And that's why small and medium enterprises, or even slightly bigger European enterprises, are required to spend a considerable amount of their resources, of their budget, for compliance with all these regulations. If that translates in bigger lobbying budgets, we're not talking about the European companies, we're talking about other kind of companies, Americans, Chinese, and so on, who have the budget and resources to do something like that, to intensify their lobbying efforts, and so on. Meanwhile, the 95% of the economy suffers because of complexity, regulatory complexity, uncertainty, instability, and plain regulation that is plain wrong. We don't want to be this the land of compliance. We want to liberate our productive and creative forces on the continent. So any kind of simplification is good enough for me.
You know what we didn't do today? We didn't overview any of the comments from the past episode, so I guess we'll do that next week. And there are so many questions left. So yeah, we're looking forward to all your suggestions and comments of where this could go and what could be done to make things actually work for the European economy.
Absolutely. Happy to have you participating in the discussion, and in our own way to bring you in by commenting on your own comments. Very happy to do that.
So thanks for the very energetic talk today, Antonios, and
thank you,
see you everyone
Krzysztof.
next week.
Thanks to everyone for watching. See you.